the more confident you are in your brush stroke, the better it's gonna look. If you're really scared and you're kind of like shaking all the way through, it's not gonna look good. Whereas if you just kind of go for it, then it's gonna be a lot smoother. So I'm gonna start here and I'm gonna bend down and I'm starting skinnier and I'm gonna make it wider as I go and fill it in more. So it's going to be thicker up here at the top, and it's going to get thinner as it goes down towards the bottom. Hello, my name's Julia. Today we're going to be painting a Stargazer lily. The brushes that you're going to need are going to be a size 12 pointed round brush, and then a smaller pointed round brush. It really doesn't matter too much, 3, 5, whatever you want to use. And I also have a water-soluble graphite pencil, palette knife. The paints we're going to be using today are going to be acrylics, and the colors are going to be white, fluorescent pink, bright red, phthalo green, chrome yellow, and a little bit of black. All right, so let's get started. So first I'm going to start off with my water-soluble pencil. If you use just a regular pencil and you're trying to paint a white flower, what's going to happen is it's just going to kind of blend in with your white paint and it'll make it look kind of dark. So I do suggest a water-soluble pencil. So for a Stargazer, you can really do it any way you want to. The petals are pretty simple. The first thing I'm going to do is eyeball where I want the center of my Stargazer, and I'm going to kind of create the petals from there. So I usually like to do things off center. This is a square canvas. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over about halfway and I'll make a little mark. I'll do that at the top and the sides just to give me a little bit of guidance. And I'm going to go over first to this mark up here, and I'm going to go down about an inch from there, and I'm going to go over, and then I'll go until I'm about an inch from this mark down here. And that's kind of where I'll shoot for my center to start off with, so I'll make a little mark there. So whichever petal is on the bottom is going to be closest to you, it's going to be bigger. So I'm going to go over here to the bottom left corner, and I'm going to go over about 2 inches, and I'm going to do my first petal. So I'm going to make a line arcing, and it's going to be reaching over to the left and coming back down. And now I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to do one going in the opposite direction. And this one's going to extend just past halfway. And then come back in. I'm going to make that a little bit wider. Okay, the next petal I'm going to do kind of my first 3 big ones first. So this one, I'm going to make a little mark, maybe about an inch below. You can use that to aim. So I'm going to start, here's my center. I'm going to go up this petal about an inch, and I'm going to do a line that's kind of bending downwards and up. And now for this petal, I'm going to start here in the center. And this one, if you want to go to the top left corner, go down about 2 inches and make a little mark. So this one, I'm going to bend up and reach for that mark. And now I'm going to do my third one. It's kind of in this front layer. This one needs to be really big and really bold because we want the Stargazer to kind of take up most of the picture plane. So we want it to be really, really big. So I'm going to make sure that I go up really high. I'm going to go up to about here, so just below the top of the canvas there. And I'm going to sink down really low as well. So this is going to be a really, really big petal. So I'm going to start off here in the center, and I'm going to do a line that's arcing up really high. And then I'm going to have it bend down. And this petal is going to be folded over. So I'm gonna have kind of a U shape right here. So now I can go and do the bottom part of it. So this part is gonna bend down, and it's gonna meet this part, and right here is where it's gonna kind of fold over. So underneath we're gonna see, you can do another little U shape there. We're gonna see how it folds over. And sketch over it a couple times. And now my next petal is going to be right here, and it's going to be reaching straight over to the right. So I'm going to start in my center. I'm going to go down about 2 inches on this petal, and this line is going to be arcing upwards. If you want to go to your bottom right corner and go up about 1 inch to make a mark to aim for, you can, or you can kind of just go for it. So it's just arcing upwards. And then along this petal, I'll go up about halfway on the petal. And I'm going to do another line. I'll go a little bit higher. Another line arcing upwards and coming down to kind of meet that one. Now I'm going to do my petal in the top center. So I'm going to climb up this petal, not quite halfway. And I'm going to do a line that's bending just slightly out towards the left. Then I'll go up over here, and this line's going to go almost just in the center of the canvas, and this one's going to bend slightly out to the right. So keep in mind as you're filling all of this in, you know, the petals are going to grow and change shape, and all flowers are different. There's literally no 2 flowers that are exactly alike, so it does not need to be perfect. So my last petal, so I'm doing 6, so I've got these 3 front ones, and then 1, 2, and 3 back ones. So I'm going to go right here. I'm going to go down this petal just a little ways, about a 1/2 inch, and do a line going right off the edge of the canvas. And then I'll come up this petal a little bit, about 1 inch, and I'm going to do a line kind of reaching towards the edge of the canvas, but not quite hitting the corner. Okay, so now we've kind of got it sketched in, and now you can go in and make any changes that you want to make. One other thing that I'm going to outline is going to be this little kind of triangular piece. It's very tall, very skinny, triangular piece here. And this is going to be green later. And I've got one right here. And one right here. And one right here. Now the center pieces of the flower, we're going to paint those in afterwards. I wouldn't outline them right now because you're going to be filling in your petals so much. So that's just not something I would do. If you do have a kneaded eraser, you can erase, you know, the little marks you made on each side of the canvas. You're going to paint over them anyways though, so it doesn't matter too much. And I think the last thing I want to change is this. I just want it to bend a little bit differently. So I'm going to have it kind of come up. And I just want it to fold, the fold to be a little bit smaller. That's more like it. And that's just my personal preference. It doesn't need to be that way. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start filling in our Stargazer. So I just love this flower. It's so gorgeous, the colors, and there's something kind of, you know, eerie about it too, with all of its bright red dots. So we're going to start off with our pointed brush. You can dip that in your water, dab it on your paper towel, and if you want to do one petal at a time, you can. If you want to paint them all at the same time, you can do that as well. One suggestion I have is painting the 3 petals in the back first, and that way you can lay the bigger ones on top. So I'm going to start off with some white paint. How this brush works, if you press down really hard, you can make a really thick line. If you very lightly glide along the canvas, you can make a very thin line. So just keep in mind that the more pressure you apply, the thicker your line is going to get. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to start off just filling these in with white paint. So I'm going to start off with this one at the top. And you might be asking, like, the canvas is white. Why are we painting it white? We're painting it white because you can always tell if there's left over white canvas showing. So it's just not the same. It's not the same bright white. And even though this is water soluble, it's a little strong, I feel like. So I'm just gonna knock it back so that we can't see it quite as well. Because we just need to barely see it to fill in our... Okay. So I'm just filling this in with white, and especially with Stargazers, I like to wrap it around the canvas. So I'm just kind of carrying it up there. And I'm just going to go through, fill them all in with white first to start off with. And I'm going to leave this little skinny triangle of space open. And you can do background first if you want to, but sometimes after I actually like paint a flower or paint my object, then I kind of change my mind on the background. So that's why I usually will paint that afterwards. Or you can just do like a light layer and then you can go back and do a final layer after you paint in your object. And so I'm using a decent amount of paint, but you don't want it so thick that it's like not gonna dry anytime this year, unless you're going for more of that style, which is really fun, and I do paint in that style sometimes, but I'm definitely not doing that right now. Okay, so I've got them filled in. And I guess one of the first things I'd like to do is add in a little bit of shading on a couple of the petals. And I'm actually going to use a gray. So I've got this white on my brush, and I am just barely going to touch a little bit of black paint. Look, I barely touched it, and look how dark that gets. So you can add white if you need to. But I'm going to take this color and I'm going to fill in this little piece down here. This is a fold, and so there would be a little shadow there. And then the other thing is I'm going to add a little shadow. So notice my brush stroke is following the shape of the petal. If I go in and I just start painting completely horizontal or completely vertical, it's not going to appear the same way. So you want to follow the shape. And I'm gonna make it just a little bit darker down here. Not too much, but just a little bit. And just a little bit more there. And we're gonna have a little fold coming up here later, but I think we'll do that after we fill it in because it's kind of folding over the top. And I guess the last place is I'll add just a teeny little bit of gray up here. Okay. So now I'm gonna go ahead and clean my brush out. So I am notorious for not using a palette knife when I'm painting with acrylic. With oil, I always use a palette knife. But for some reason with acrylic, I like to just go for it. So you'll probably see me doing that here, like right now. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna start in with this pink. So I'm gonna take some of this bright red here, and I'm gonna start to mix that in with some pink. Do a little bit over here, do it a little bit more pink. Yeah, that's a gorgeous color. Okay, perfect. All right. Really, any pink will do, but you get the idea. All right, so I'm gonna start in the center here, and this is gonna be your darkest area. And it's going to get lighter and lighter as you go out. And you know what would actually be a great brush for this? It's my old standby, the bristle brush. So I'm going to take this brush, I'm going to squeeze out any excess water. I'm going to make sure it's dry and fluffy. And I'm going to start kind of stamping in to get a nice texture. If you go on top of your other petal a little bit, that's okay, I wouldn't worry about that. And I'm gonna kind of go all the way out until I'm almost at the edge. Yeah, I like the way that looks a lot actually. So I get a little bit of that again. And start stamping. So with this brush, if you press down really hard, you're gonna make a different mark. So I'm very, very lightly tapping, and then you can just keep going back and grabbing a little bit more, starting in the center so that it stays darker in the center, and then working your way out until you're almost at the edge. And it's kind of up to you how bright or how dark that you want it. So you can also use like just the edge if you want to make kind of a smaller and I'm going to start to make it a little more intense now. And now I'm going to leave this one alone and move on to another one. And that will give this one a little bit of time to dry, so it won't blend in with the white too much. You're going to want that at first, but then after that you kind of want it to get a little bit more vibrant. So now I'm going to go on to my next petal. So I'm going to do, I'll do this one down here. So the same thing, I'm going to start here in the center. You're going to accidentally go over your little triangle a little bit. It's okay. Now I'm just using the edge because I want it to get kind of thinner and thinner. And now I'm going to kind of wipe off my brush so there's not that much on it. I'm going to stamp over this again. And if you wanted it to be even softer, you can also stamp over it with white paint. So if you're trying to blend it some more, white paint would still retain that texture. It will go like a more light pink look, but it'll retain the texture, but just make it like a little more blended. So that's an option too. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to go ahead and go to my next one. I'm going to wipe off that white paint. And if you're painting and any of them get kind of too dry, you can clean out your brush. And you can go in with white paint again, because this one's particularly dry. I didn't put that much paint on it, I guess. I'll go over that one again. And I'll go over the next one I'm going to do, which I'll do this one next. Okay. And I just want to show you actually one other technique you can do if you feel more comfortable painting this way, is you can come in with your pointed brush and you could actually do like lines before you go in. I mean, we're going to do this anyway, but you could go in before you go in with this brush just to kind of define it, and then brush over it. It's really up to you. Okay, so just stamping over that. Go all the way, almost out to the edges. And wipe my brush, grab a little bit more. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and wipe my brush again, come in, and I will go for my next petal. So I'll go ahead and do this one next. I'm going to do some very light brush strokes here, going out towards the edge of the petal. And then I'm going to stamp over that. And you might get some little bristles in there, and you can just pick those out. So before I move on, I'm going to actually take my 1-inch flat. I'm gonna dip that in my water, dab it on my paper towel, and I'm gonna use this to just kind of lightly feather this out a little bit. You can use a teeny bit of white paint if it's dry. And remember that up close you're seeing all these brush strokes, but the painting's meant to go up on the wall, and it's not going to look like that when you get up close to it. I just really want to feel the movement of that petal. And if at any point you can use this 1-inch flat, and it's really great for I'm just kind of smoothing things over, like if you wanted a more smooth look, it will take some of that texture away, which I really like the texture too. But if you want to, you can kind of mix it up. And we'll use that a little bit more here in a little bit. Okay. So now I'm just cleaning out my size 12 bristle brush. We're going to continue on. So again, starting in the center, and you can see like, whoa, right? That's a lot of paint. So if that happens to you, just kind of wipe your brush on the side and just keep going. Got my little triangle in. Okay, so again now I'm going to use my 1-inch flat, and I like to just squeeze it, just make sure it's like nice and flat. And then again I'm going to add some direction for these brush strokes. So my brush strokes, I'm using the flat part of the brush. If I go straight up like this, perpendicular, I'm going to pick up the paint and just remove it from the canvas. So notice the handle is kind of down, almost parallel to your canvas. And I'm very lightly going to brush out to the sides here. Do same thing over here, very lightly. Yeah, because it gives a little sense of movement. And then on this one, it's kind of folding over. So I'm going to do brush strokes that are kind of fanning in. And you can take a little white. My white's pretty dry there. Yeah, that's nice. Okay. So we still need to get it a lot more pigmented, kind of right in the center areas, and then we'll also do some bright red spots. So we're going to start on our next layer. If you want to use a slightly smaller bristle brush, you can. So I'm going to get in there now, and you can touch it to see. So that's like nice and dry. So I'm going to get in there. I'm going to make this one a lot darker because I want it to be kind of popping out from underneath. And you also don't want it all even because it'll kind of go up higher in some areas and not quite as high in others. Notice I'm not really going back to grab more paint. I just kind of keep going over this and over this. And I'm just kind of feathering it out. So I'm going to go over to my next one. So I'll go and do another layer on this one up here now. And you're gonna have like a little bit of overlap when you're doing the stamping technique and you're kind of getting down here, but we'll paint over that. That's what's great about acrylic paint. It's like anything you don't like, you just paint over it. And I'm using a little more of the fluorescent pink just to get kind of a really vibrant look in there in the middle. Okay. So now I'm going to do this other petal that's kind of behind here. It's the same thing. And just like we talked about before, like the darker area can kind of reach up further in some of your petals. Okay. So now I'm going to come in, and those three, I'm going to have those be kind of the darkest. And I'm going to do these other ones a little bit lighter. And if there's too much water, what will happen is you'll just kind of remove some of the paint. So I can tell there was just a little bit too much moisture when I was painting on this petal, and it's still there. I'm going to do some brush strokes that are a little bit horizontal, slightly kind of bending upwards there. But this one is even still wet, so let's just leave that guy alone for a second. And we'll come into one of these other ones. I'm just stamping along the sides. And then same thing over here. come back and give this guy another shot. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what happened in there. It was just too much water, too much water. So if that happens, you can just kind of wipe it, get some of that excess water off, and go on your merry way. Okay. So now there's going to be some actual more defined lines. You can take your smaller pointed brush and get your red and fluorescent pink mixed together. And we're going to do some actual lines into these now. So with this one, it's really important that the line looks like it's curving. Otherwise, the fold of the petal is not going to quite look natural. So I'm going to start up here at the top. And I'm very barely touching the canvas. And then you can do another one starting down here. And maybe some don't go all the way up, they just go kind of up and then stop. It's a shorter one. Gonna do a longer one in the center. Kind of disappears to a point. Now over here. And on some of them, if you want to add a little extra red, you can too. Like this one's already really dark. So if I go in, especially along these edges of my tall, skinny triangle, and if yours is gone, you can just draw in a new one. Now we'll go to this one. So I really lost my little tall skinny triangle, but just gonna add a new one in, guess where it ends. And if you're digging a little bit of paint off, it's totally fine, because it even kind of adds to this part, makes the lines look a little bit skinnier. And then I'm going to come over and do some on this one. And if you need a smaller brush, you can, if you want to get some really teeny little lines. And I'm actually going to use this brush while I have it to darken right here. And the reason for that, because there's a shadow there cast from this petal. So I'm just going to add a little more. And you can tap along the edges just to feather it out and make it a little darker in there. And I'll do the same thing over here on this one. So right along the bottom edge here. And this isn't really a shadow, but I'm just going to define it and make it a little bit darker right there. Okay. So we can also start adding in some more kind of sweeping brush strokes. So what I suggest doing is adding in the dots first. So stargazers sometimes have these little dots. So you can take whatever red color you want to use and you can add little dots. So maybe this one right here. And you want them to be random, some big, some small. Maybe there's some space in between some. Maybe there's a little cluster. And I'm not going to add so many on these bottom three. You can if you want to, but I think I'm going to leave those. But I'm going to come in here now and fill this in a little bit more. So I'm really going to make sure I get the water out this time. And I think we just need some thicker paint working in this one here. So I'm going to go back in with some white. And wipe my brush off. And then I'm going to kind of just soften what we've already have here. Yeah, I like that a lot better. It's getting a lot softer. And then I'm going to go in with a little bit more the red, pink. Now let's switch to my smaller one now. And I'm really getting it dry. These brushes can hold just an amazing amount of water. It's kind of crazy. Look, even after squeezing all that water out, it's almost like it just hides up in the brush. And then on this one, you can also go in and do the same thing you did on the other ones, where you do some actual lines. I'm going to come in here in the center and just very lightly glide down. Before we move on, I'm going to go ahead and take our 1 inch flat. Let make sure we have a nice flat edge. It's not too wet, and we're gonna lightly do some brush strokes over this one. It's down here at the bottom, they're gonna just kind of come outwards. It's so light. And if you pick up any paint, just wipe it off. Same thing. And you can even go in some areas too, that's fine too. And up here at the top, on the left, it's going to go just kind of slightly left diagonal, and on the right, slightly right diagonal. In the middle, it's going to go kind of straight down the center. So before I put this brush away, I'm actually going to brush over our little dots too. And if there's any little kind of thick wet spots, they can blend up a little bit. So you can see I kind of got those like little streaks. If they're really dry, like these ones look pretty much dry over here, you go in, just add a teeny tiny bit of paint, and do it again. Now I'm going to start just kind of touching things up. So on this one, I just feel like I want like a little bit more white. So I can take my flat brush and white paint along the edge there. And I'm just kind of smoothing this out a little bit. I just want some parts to look a little bit smoother. And I almost forgot my little dots on this guy right here. So come in. Some big, some small. Some clusters. And then again, very lightly brushing over them. Okay. So now the next thing we want to do is we want to start going back over our edges a little bit because it might take a couple layers. So it's going to be your pointed brush and you want it really dry. So squeeze any extra water out of there. Grab some white paint. And anywhere you want it to be pure white, you're going to go do another layer. So I'm going to come here. And I'm just going to go right over this edge and clean it up. So we're just adding this white anywhere you'd like to just bring it back a little bit. So especially right here, I want it to look like this petal is clearly in front, so I need a really sharp edge. So sharp edge means it doesn't look fuzzy at all. It looks very clearly defined. And your lines, they do not need to be super straight, and if they actually wiggle just very subtly, it will look even more like a flower, because flower petals, they're so delicate and they do kind of wiggle just slightly. And so right here, I don't want to have this, clear edge going the wrong direction, so I'm going to feather that out. So I'm going to use the side of my brush, and I'm brushing in towards the center of the petal in the direction that I need to go. I'm even going to do a little bit of white in here, going in. And then this one right here, I clearly want this one to be in front. I'll go over that. And again, just kind of feathering it out. And so I can see right here, I'm going to need a couple layers. You can just paint more thick paint, just grabbing more and kind of laying it on with your handle close to the edge. And that'll work too. I got kind of a thick piece of paint right there. Okay. So now we have over here, I mentioned there's going to be this kind of little fold over petal. And so that's going to be right here. And we'll do it in just first white paint first. And now I'm actually going to get a teeny little bit of gray. And I'm going to keep brushing until I kind of get rid of most of it. And I'm going to do gray on the bottom of my brush and white on the top. And if it's too much, you can go over it to blend it in. But that gives you a kind of nice little fold there. So while you have this gray on your brush, you can also go in and do one more layer over here. And then to make this stand out a little bit more, I'm just going in with a small pointed brush, and I'm just making sure I get this really, really up close to the edge and defined. And making sure I get this really up close to the edge and defined, and that'll make it stand out more. And I'm just kind of tapping now to just blend it in a little bit. But that makes it look more like it's in front. Okay, so now I think is a good time to go over our little triangles. So I'm going to take this same brush, I'm going to clean it out, and I'm going to first do white paint because we want it to, if the red's behind it and we're trying to paint this yellow green, then you'll just see the red in the background. So I'm going to go in with just white first. So first just kind of filling in my triangle, and then I'm going to kind of feather it out on the edges too. So I'm going to very lightly brush. And you want to do that with very little paint on your brush. If there's too much, it's not quite the same. So now I can go in and add this one back in. So start off not laying it in there super thick to make it stand out. Start off just doing one layer. Wipe your brush off. And then very lightly soften the edges. And then go back in. And do it a little bit thicker so that it's a little bit more opaque right in the center there. So now I'm going to do this one over here. Wipe my brush off, soften it. And I think to make this even more interesting, I want to add another fold. It would look good if this petal folded over right here. So I'm going to start with my brush right here, and I'm just going to do a brush stroke kind of folding upwards and out. I'll go over that again. And I'm lightly going to just kind of feather it out. And I'm doing brush strokes kind of rounded, arcing upwards so that it looks like we're following the direction of the petal. And then I'll go in and go over my little triangle again. And then go over this petal again. So this one right here, we barely see it poking out. So let's do a teeny tiny little thing there. Over here we have a little bit more. And then we have the center one, which is really kind of coming down into the fold. It's a little bit shorter because it's coming towards us. Over that one again in the middle. Let me go over each of them one more time. Okay, so we have our, oops, I forgot one. Go over that one more time. All right, so we have our little centers. Those are going to be green when we do another layer over them. You can continue whenever you see that it's been a little bit and it's dry, you can continue to go over the edges of your petals again, where you're seeing the bottom color stick out, because that'll take a couple layers depending on what white paint you're using. Okay. So like here, I can clearly see the pink underneath. So I'm gonna need to keep layering that. So the next thing I'm gonna do, we're gonna be kind of waiting for a lot of this to dry, but I do wanna add in some kind of softer areas. So I'm gonna use the same brush. So I'll start off with white, and I'm just gonna kind of soften a little bit of this. So not too much white paint, and I'm just dragging it down into my little spots here. And you can even add some white lines. They almost look like little kind of veins that are curving along with the center of this one. And again, I'm like right in between, but I'm just gonna take this moment to just add another layer on those. And now we're gonna do the same thing with the red. So I'm cleaning my brush out, getting it dry, taking some of my one little spritz on each of those. And it's almost like you're scrubbing. You're just kind of scrubbing it in. And it's just gonna soften some of the texture. A lot of the texture we want to keep, but some of it we just want to soften, and we also want to make it darker in the centers. So you can also do that now. So I'm lightly brushing over, and the texture of the canvas is just kind of helping me to soften it a little bit. And let's see, we still got a lot to do with this one right now. So let's go ahead and start on that. So we're going to get right around our little I'm going to get just a little bit more of my fluorescent pink. So I'm going to do these kind of bold. And then I'm going to come in with some white, kind of go back towards them. And then I'm going to take just some water and I'm going to brush over them again. And the fluorescent pink's actually great for softening because it's very, very transparent anyway. So I'm gonna add extra red right along where the green areas are gonna be. I'll add a little extra red. And I'm doing some brush strokes kind of just going out. So they're slightly bending upward, but they're going to the right just to give this one a little even more direction and movement. I'm going to come in here on this one again and add extra red. The red is going to make the green pop even more. And you can also soften the edges even more too from when you did it before. So now I'm just going to take kind of a watery brush and I'm going to do some watery red pink paint. I'll use my bigger brush because I'm trying to really add a little softness here. So I've got watery, and you can kind of use your finger to dab if it gets a little crazy. But what I'm doing, the purpose of this, is where from the texture that we were doing before, where there's white spots, I don't want too many of those. I want some, but I don't want a lot. especially see right in here. So you can see when you do that, it just kind of wipes them out. And it softens it just a little bit more. I'm going to do some lines coming out from the center right here. And I can darken up any of these if they got too light. And now it's starting to kind of get where I want it. So you can see how these are all soft. Now look right here. It's a lot more splotchy. And I'm just going to take it back a little. You want variation, so you can leave like some splotches. But others, it's just, you want to just knock it back a little bit. Okay, so we will do the background while this dries so we can come in and add the centers. But before you move on to that, you'll want to do one last layer of white wherever you need it. So I need it right here. And I need it down here. And feel free to use the smaller brush if that's more convenient. Okay, so now we're ready to do our background. So I'm going to clean out my pointed brush. You can do any color that you want to in the background. I'm going to do kind of different shades of green blended together. And I'm going to make it really blurry as if we're really focused on this Stargazer and the background's just kind of blurring away. So I'm going to start off just doing some globs of yellow. And I've got my size 12 pointed brush. And now I'm going to do some yellow with some green. And now I'm going to go in with some straight green. And that's going to look really bright at first, but don't worry, we are going to tone it back. We're just making sure that we get kind of a lot of different shades in there. Okay, so now I'm going to take my green and I'm going to mix red, crimson red, alizarin crimson and phthalo green are literally my two favorite paint colors to use together. They are just amazing. We're gonna get some really kind of dark shades in here. And it's what this red's gonna do is it's gonna neutralize all of this. And we'll see in a moment. And we have to be really careful around this one. And we could probably go in and define that a little more before we finish, so we'll do that. For right now, I'll just leave it at that. And we'll do a couple layers on it. Add a little bit of that here, a little bit of that here. Okay, and now I'm just going to kind of start brushing. What did I do over here? I think I touched my arm to it. So don't do that. I'm just going to wipe it back so there's no thick paint. And I'll go in with a little white over that. But now what you can do is you can just kind of start brushing in any brush stroke you want. You could do more horizontal brush strokes, vertical, diagonal. I'm going to kind of just turn my brush in all sorts of different directions. And I'll probably actually add a little white in here too to make it more opaque. And you'll have to get right up next to some of these edges. So you'll want to do that while your brush is kind of full of paint. So you're going to want to get right up to those edges, and I'm going to start to add a little bit of white in too. But I wouldn't recommend starting off with a white and kind of go really white really fast. But just play around with it until you like it. So keep in mind, the more you keep brushing over it, the more it's just going to blend together. So if I keep brushing and brushing over this, eventually it'll be one color. So if you don't want that to happen, then at some point you can just stop. But if you do want to blend over it, you can keep brushing. This yellow is just a little too bright. Like, I like just this teeny tiny bit of it showing through. But if it's too bright, what it's going to do is it's going to distract from the flower. I just went into the petal just a little bit, so since I'm catching it while it's still fairly new, I'm just taking a little bit. So I'm doing short brush strokes, meaning I'm kind of dabbing my brush and lifting repeatedly to give myself some texture. And so you could like use the bristle brush and do the stamping, but then what it's gonna do is it's gonna mimic the same texture of the flower. And so I want more variation in my texture, so that's why I'm not doing that. There's definitely something to be said from being overworked. So I would definitely encourage you to kind of stop and look at it after you've worked on it for a little while. So don't brush over it too much. I still have one little corner over here. And I wouldn't make this too dark or too bright. And I'm going to switch to my smaller brush. And the reason for that is wherever you have the darkest color and the lightest color meet, that's going to create an area of high contrast, and then your eyes are just going to go straight for that. And we don't really want our eyes going over here and going off of the picture plane. So I'm just going to go for a kind of lighter green here. I'm going to make this a little bit lighter too. Okay, so if you are painting your edges, then don't forget to wrap it around the sides. I'm going to go in and just add a little bit more darker. Just really want to darken here. Let me get a little more dark up here too. Okay, so for the last step of the background, I'm going to take my 1-inch flat, just like we were doing with our petals, and just damp, barely any paint on it, or sorry, barely any water on it, and I'm just going to lightly brush over this. Softening it just a little bit. I think I'm going to take this brush and a lighter tone greens, so some white, some yellow, some green, and some red. And that's kind of a pretty color. I'm just gonna knock some of it back just a little bit. So you gotta be careful not to dig off the paint. See how it's digging off the paint right there? Okay. I think that's about where I want it. So now, if you have some time, I would take it and paint your edges, and that'll give this a little bit more time to dry. If you're not going to paint your edges right now, we can get right in doing the center. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our small pointed brush, and we're going to use green. So I'm going to do a light green. So I'm going to do yellow, a little bit green, phthalo green. I want it more yellow than it is green. And I'm going to add a teeny bit of white too. And I'm going to take that and just start adding it into the centers. So while you have the thick paint on your brush, you can go in and do a first layer on each of them. And then when you're kind of out of paint, you can go and kind of soften the edges. And go over kind of on top of the red just a little bit. So now I'm going to darken up the green just a little bit, and I'm going to stick to mainly the center of each of those so that it's light yellow green on the edges and it's a little bit darker in the middle. Okay. Okay, this next part, it can be a little bit intimidating, just because you've already invested so much into it, but you really don't need to worry too much because all flowers are different. So now we're going to paint the center of the flower, and there is the stamen and the stamens and the pistils. So the pistil is going to be that larger piece that comes up and stands up the tallest, and then the stamens are going to be the smaller pieces surrounding it. So we're going to start off with a light green, and we want a lot of white in it. It's going to be very, very light. You can spin your brush in a circle to kind of redefine the point. I'm gonna first draw the very end so I know what I'm kind of shooting for. So I'm gonna have the end be right up here. And so the end of it is gonna be kind of bulbous. It's gonna be like two round shapes right next to each other. And I'll tell you, you're gonna have to do a couple layers on this, so if you can see through it, just don't worry too much about that. And it's gonna start here in the center. We want the center to look like it's kind of further away. And you know what, I missed a little green here. Let's go in and do that first. This green needs to go down a lot further. I don't know why I stopped right there. It should go like right down into the center. Okay. So we're aiming for this spot up here. The center is going to basically be right here in the middle. And you can kind of outline it if that helps. Make a little circle there. So my first piece, it's going to bend, and this is the piston, it's going to bend down and then back up. So I'm going to start in the center here, and it's going to bend. And one other thing, the more confident you are in your brush stroke, the better it's going to look. If you're really scared and you're kind of like shaking all the way through, it's not going to look good. Whereas if you just kind of go for it, then it's going to be a lot smoother. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to bend down, and I'm starting skinnier, and I'm going to make it wider as I go and fill it in more. So it's going to be thicker up here at the top, and it's going to get thinner as it goes down towards the bottom. So now I'm going to take some white, start to fill that in so it gets a little bit more opaque. Now I'm going to load my brush up with this light color. It's going to be especially light down here at the end, so I'll do another layer over that. And then it's going to be a little bit darker coming down. So now I can take kind of a darker version. You still want it a little bit neutral though, so add some red or some pink if you need to. And I'm going to come down from the top with this darker green. And it's going to just fade into the lighter green. And you'll have to do this in a couple layers because it kind of depends on the acrylic paints that you're using. Okay, so now you can see how that's fading from light to dark. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to dip 1/2 of my brush in the lighter green and 1/2 in the darker green. And you might be going like, what do you mean 1/2? It's a point. You can flatten it out if that helps you see the half a little bit better. But this will help me get some nice kind of defined edges. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of that darker green around the bottoms up here. And that's going to help that to look more bulbous, like it's sticking out. And then you can go in with one more layer of your super light green over the top. So that's our first little piece there. And you know, I still kind of feel like it needs a little bit of definition. So I'm going to do that same thing, load up in the lighter shade, and then I'm going to get a little bit of the darker, and I'm going to line that up so that it's on the side that I want to stand out the most. And you can go in and just trace along it like this. I just sometimes like it more when it's more streaky looking. Okay, so now we have to do the other pieces of our centers here. So now we're going to do the stamens. And so this is the only one that's kind of tall. It's adding a little highlight in the middle there. This is the only one that's kind of tall like this. The other ones are going to be shorter and they're going to kind of be more pointy. They're all going to be coming right here from the center. So I'm going to come right here, and they're all kind of going the same direction. So I'm going to dip down and come up to a point, down, up to a point, and then I'll add one. It's going to kind of come down here. Now I'm going to do that same technique. So I need to mix up a little bit of my green. So palette knife, green, yellow, mix that together. Because I don't want to use straight phthalo green because it can kind of get kind of aqua with the white. So I've got my brush loaded up with the lighter green, and now I'm going to dip and get a little bit of the darker green on there. And I'm going to line up that darker green so that it's on the bottom. And I'm just going to trace over those same ones that I just did. And if you start to lose the darker green, you can add some more. And then again, we want overlapping, so there's actually going to be another one, because we'll do 1, 2 there. Let's do one that's going to come out of right here. It's going to bend up, then it's going to cross the other two. So you can do multiple layers over those if you want to. I'm probably going to kind of call it good right there, but I am going to take my brush and I'm going to darken up around this now. So down here on the bottom, darken that a little bit. And same thing up here. Darken that a little bit. I think that's good. So now I'm going to start adding on, no, you know what, I'm going to go over this one more time. So I'm going to do more yellow and white. I'm going to make it really, really bright. And I'm going to add up just a teeny tiny bit actually of red. See if I can get like the smallest amount ever. Because I want this one to stand out a little bit more. So I'm doing the main one, again, the piston. Yeah, let's do even a little bit more red. Yeah, because that helps distinguish that one a little bit. And let's add a little white highlight on it, these pieces, to make those stand out. And now we still just have just a few things to do. Okay, so let me take some white and cover up this little mishap over here. Okay, so now is where you'd want to do one more layer over everything, and that will give this green just a moment to dry, and then we're going to come in and add the ends of the stamens, okay? So white paint anywhere where the background got a little crazy, you can go over that now. You can also soften. I'll show you how to soften an edge. So with this one, I can add in some fresh white paint along the edge there. And I can do the same thing over here. And then what I can do is take some of my whatever green color I had. And you can go up along the edge, and then you can take your brush. You can either kind of do this all at once, or you can brush each side and then take your brush and line it up so it's half on the white, half on the green, and brush over it. And you can see how soft that is. And go over it again if you want. It's going to give you a nice soft edge. I wouldn't soften all of them. I'm softening that one because I want it to kind of be a little blurry in the background. Like these ones in the front here, I'd leave them really, really crisp. But if you want to soften a couple of them, you can. I'll soften that one. And soften that one just a bit. Okay, so we're still just taking white paint. Now this one, you can see it like looks like it's behind. It's got some of the one from behind, so I'm going to go over that again. And right here, I'm going to add some overlapping and have that go right over that green part. Do the same thing right here. I'm going to mix up a little bit of light pink. And I want this to look like it's kind of folding in. And let's see. Okay, so now we're going to go in with the ends of the stamens. So we're going to do these in, this is what the little bit of black paint was for. We're going to do them in kind of orange first. So go ahead and take some yellow and some of your fluorescent pink and mix those together. And I'm gonna start off doing one, let's see, they're gonna be on the ends of these little green lines that we did, but not on every single one. So first I'm gonna have one crossing up right here, and then I'll do another one right next to that. This one will just have a little one on the end. And then here I'm going to have one kind of bending sideways. And you know what? I forgot one of my little green stems, so we'll add in another one. And it's going to go right here. So now we'll come in first to black paint. And you can kind of outline those. And then do little tapping. This one's more of round than it is so much long. But they are rather kind of fuzzy. So that's why we do the tapping. now we're going to go through and add on more of our orange color, but we're going to do some white first, just to make it a little bit more, pop a little bit more. So I'll just do a little bit of white in some areas, especially through here, because we don't want the green to show through these because these are not transparent. And then you can go in with the orange. And when I'm like at the end of a painting, I'll paint really thick just to get it in there. So I can go in and glob this on. No matter how thick you make it though, this color grouping is not going to be opaque. It's just, these are translucent paints, this yellow and this fluorescent. And now I'm going to take a little bit of red and just get a little red in there too. I'll make it pop even more. Okay, so now I still need to get in that last little green stem. So I'm getting my lighter yellowy green here. And I'm dipping one side in my darker green. I'm going to kind of just sneak up from behind here. And we're pretty much done. There's one last thing that I'm really seeing that's really standing out to me, and it's what's happening. Hello, what is going on there? Okay, so there's one last thing that I see, and that's this, what's happening right here. Okay, so we're gonna make this a little more defined. I'm going to have the red go right off the edge there. I'm going to have some pink. It's also going to go right off the edge there. And then I'm going to go in with white, and we're just making it really look like it's kind of in front and it's popping out. And also like it has little kind of curves to it. Oops. All right, and that's the last step. So whenever you're finished, don't forget to paint your edges. It was a pleasure painting with you today. Thank you so much for watching.